What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the King Closers Formula. I am the King Closer, RJ Bates III, actually coming to you live on this beautiful Tuesday at 2:22 p.m. I actually did miss the past two Tuesdays just due to travel events that we were attending. But we still brought you live videos. It just, my ass wasn't in the seat and I wasn't live. So excited to be back in the routine of coming to you live on these Tuesdays. And today we're going to be talking about the difference between being a wholesaler, a flipper, a long-time buy and hold investor, and or a realtor. The reason why this topic is today's video is because yesterday during the Titanium University implementation call, there was a question from, I don't want to say a newer member. I think he's been with us probably 3-4 months at this point, but he's at the point in his career where he's starting to gain traction and he's starting to see all the different shiny objects and options that are available to him with the deals that he's acquiring. And so he asked the question of, I've got this deal. It's a pretty good one. It doesn't need a lot of work, and I've got options. I can assign the deal today for a $35,000 assignment. I could also take it down. I could wholesale it, probably make somewhere between $50,000 to $55,000, or I could take the property down and I could actually do rehab to it, and then I could refinance it and I could BRRRR it out and I could pull all this tax-free money and I could keep it long-term. I could capture some equity and I could have long-term cash flow. Which one do you think I should do? Now, it's a very valid question. And I don't ever want to just sit here and preach wholesale, because you guys hear me talk about that all the time. But I will always continue to preach hedgehog concept. What is it that your business does? Determine that, stick to it. Because as we're going to go through these 4 different options, if you're going to be a wholesaler, a flipper, a landlord, or a realtor, they all require different skill sets and different SOPs, standard operating procedures. And what does your business focus on? And my feedback to Manny, that was the TU member, specifically was, listen, I understand where you're coming from, and you're looking at it as all of these different options that do exist on the blue sky scenario side of things. But let's look at it and say, if you are a wholesaler and you were to take this down and something doesn't go right, what happens to your wholesale operation? If you were to go out and you were to do the BRRRR strategy, you still have to do $50,000 worth of rehab. You then have to find the lender. You have to go through all of the lender requirements and the paperwork. There's a lot of headaches that can come up, and each and every moment is distracting you from your core business on one individual deal. So that is why I'm such an advocate for the hedgehog concept, making sure that you're staying focused. Now, funny enough, later in the evening, there was a post by another TU member who was not attending the implementation call that morning. Now, maybe he watched a replay later on, but he was not a part of the call. Matthew Kunkelman out of South Carolina, he is an investor who takes ownership of properties. He's not wholesaling. He's an end buyer in South Carolina. And he posted, listen, I hear all of you wholesalers wanting to talk about the opportunities that exist with all these properties that you're acquiring. But what nobody ever wants to tell you is what could go wrong. And he talked about how there was some graffiti on the brick of a house that he owned, and he just paid to have that graffiti removed. The next day he shows up to the property, graffiti is back. So now he has to do it again. And he's like, listen, this is just one tiny little thing. It's a little bit of extra expense, but it's a headache to go through the process of calling the contractor, getting them to go out there, give you a quote, hiring them, scheduling them, making sure they did the work correctly, and then paying them. Each and every one of those moments takes you away from what you could be doing and what you should be doing if you're a wholesaler. So in today's video, what we're going to do is we're going to break down a specific example property and what that looks like for the four different strategies that we're going to be talking about, between what does it look like as the wholesaler, what does it look like as the flipper, what does it look like for the landlord, and what does it look like for the realtor. Now, that being said, because we are live today, I always love to know where you guys are tuning in from. Let me know. Where are you tuning in today? We got Mr. Braden Bissell. What's up, Braden? Shout out to Mr. Bissell. We had Braden and Abby on here a couple of weeks ago, probably about a month ago at this point. They are officially engaged. Congratulations, Braden and Abby. We're all super happy for you. We got Mr. Kevin from Lakeland, Florida. What's up, Angel? I am officially live this Tuesday. Chris, what's going on, man? We got a comment from Twitch. Is there a chance I can get a job money earning from you? Yeah, I'm always looking to hire. I'm going to need a little bit more before I even entertain that, though. There's a lot of people we know. What's up, Zero Forever? You got Massachusetts, Orlando. I was just in Orlando. What's up, Taylor? Look forward to seeing you at Element 22. Tyler, you're in Iowa? You didn't have a typo there? Maryland, what's going on? Fort Worth. What's up, Phil? Funky Town. Odessa. Steven from Arkansas. I always know where Steven's coming from. Can't deny that Razorback profile picture. San Antonio and another Fort Worth. Good stuff. Well, appreciate you guys tuning in. Make sure you like today's video. And let's get into this. So the example that we're going to be using, we're just going to call it 123 Maple Street. Normally I go with the low-hanging fruit of 123 Main Street. But we'll go 123 Maple Street, and that we can get this under contract as a wholesaler for $150,000. And let's just say the ARV is $250,000. Okay. Now, I don't necessarily love those numbers, but it's what I've got written down in my notes. All right. We're just going to say we're in a super hot market. All right. So the after repair value is $250,000. We can get it for $150,000, and it needs roughly $30,000. Now, what we would say here is this is just like a normal wholesale transaction, borderline deal, not deal. It would have to be a pretty hot market. But those are the numbers, okay? Now, as the wholesaler, up front, you're going to have the overhead expenses of your systems. So you're going to have your dispo software, your comping software, a couple $100 a month. And then you have to generate leads. Now, that's where the majority of your expenses are going to be accrued because, yeah, on this one lead, let's say it was a nationwide lead and it cost you $30, we don't close every single one. So you're going to have the leads that you don't close. Let's say all together, this is going to cost you $1,000 to transact this deal, okay? So you've got that expense up front. We can get it under contract for $150,000. We're going to try to assign it for $165,000. Now, to get the property under contract, if you do it the right way, you know, it shouldn't take you that long. Now, I get it. There's always the scenarios where, hey, it take you 3 months, 6 months, 9 months. I just had an example last month where it took us 2 years, or actually close to 3 years, to get the property under contract. There's all the different scenarios. Well, let's just say this is a normal one. You call, ready to go, highly motivated. They sign the contract. Okay, so not a lot of time invested on the acquisition side. Then recon moves pretty quickly. You should be able to get pictures back on the property, whether it's from the seller, hiring a company like Investor Boots, or getting a known buyer out there, or hiring a handyman. Whatever you need to do to get recon done of the property. Again, maybe a small investment, maybe another $100, $150, something like that, or preferably free. But again, not time intensive, not heavy on the operating capital side of things. and then you move on to dispositions. Now, I did not come up with this metric. This is actually a metric that is created by the Titanium University dispo houses. So this is like something that's created its own little world inside of the Titanium University community. But there are people that don't acquire their own deals. They're purely doing JV dispositions of other TU members' deals that they acquire. What the majority of those dispo houses have said is that once we get pictures and we start the marketing of a deal on dispositions, we will know whether or not we are able to dispo the property within 72 hours. Okay, so three business days. It makes sense, right? You're going to have a pretty decent idea of the traction that you're receiving from a wholesaler. Let's say it takes you 72 hours. Now you've gotten traction. Buyers want to go see it. You've got to schedule the walkthroughs and do all of that. Let's just say it takes a week for you to dispo the property for a $15,000 assignment fee. Okay, that's pretty typical. And then we're going to close in 30 days. All of these are just normal wholesale transactions. I get there's always the outliers, but this is a pretty normal transaction. So altogether, you're going to have $15,000 worth of revenue inside of your business, and it should cost you somewhere around $1,000 to $2,000 for that deal. Altogether, it takes you 30 days, but realistically, on the work side of things, when it comes to acquisitions and dispositions, should only take you about a week to 2 weeks. And then after that, there's some transaction coordination, just making sure that the deal proceeds to the closing table. But altogether, not a whole lot of risk involved from the wholesale side, especially if you're protecting yourself with your inspection periods, not putting a ton of earnest money down, not doing anything ridiculous like non-refundable earnest money, which I don't recommend for virtual wholesaling. Realistically, very low risk. $15,000, good payday, but we are a very transactional business. So once that deal's done, the money starts evaporating and you've got to go do another deal. That's the downside to wholesaling. But the upside is very low risk. Doesn't take you a lot of money. I have always said it does take you some money, but it doesn't take you a ton of money to be able to get properties under contract, especially if you have the necessary skill sets. So that's where we come in as a wholesaler. Now, the issue that I see is that it's almost too damn easy for people. Like they look at it and they go, but there's so many other things that I could do. And they're not necessarily happy with just that $15,000 payday. They want to increase the exit strategies that they have and or acquisition strategies. And they want to explore these other options. And so we all kind of understand how simple wholesaling can be, but now let's look at what else happens on the other strategies. So let's talk about the flipper, okay? Now let's say this is not one of our buyers. Let's say this is an flipper who is actually doing direct-to-seller marketing, which I'll be honest with you, is fairly rare in this industry. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. There are people out there that flip houses that are doing their own marketing, but there's quite a few that are getting their deals from wholesalers and or realtors. That's very common. Now, let's say in this case, they went to direct-to-seller marketing. They're still, as the flipper, going to have that overhead, the same overhead that we have as a wholesaler. So they're going to have that up front, but they're going to have to take down this property. And whether it's cash, $150,000, private money that they're borrowing that they either have to pay interest monthly on or accrue the interest and pay it all off at the end, or taking out a hard money loan, right? Which requires capital for the gap, because normally hard money lenders require some sort of cash down payment. Maybe they'll cover 90% of the purchase price and 100% of the rehab, but normally they want a little bit of skin in the game from that end buyer. All right. And then you're also going to have to cover your monthly interest payments as well as everything else that comes along. utilities, taxes, insurance, maintenance on the property, right? A lot of times as wholesalers, we'll look at a property and we'll say, well, yeah, it needs $30,000 worth of work, but that's not accounting for the amount of times you have to mow the yard, keeping up with the landscaping, and just maintenance on the property, as well as the holding costs that are accrued on this. All right. Now, as a flipper, you have to have that cash, that capital available for you. All right. Now, they're going to put $30,000. Let's say they're going the hard money route, which is a probably more common route than the cash and the private money. They have to go do the work, and then they get reimbursed from the hard money lender once the work is completed. Okay. Now, this is one of the areas that most wholesalers don't understand if you've never flipped a house before. As the flipper, you're going to go to your hard money lender and you're going to say, here's the scope of work that I'm going to do. I'm going to do floors, kitchens, bathrooms, paint, appliances, countertops, all these different things. Now, let's say you don't put an HVAC on the scope of work. Well, if the HVAC goes out and now you have to do work on it, you're not going to, you can't just, it's not a pool that you can just pull out of. You only get that money once you've completed that task and make sure that it costs that amount that you allocated for. So, for example, if I say countertops are going to cost me $3,000, once I've put in the countertops, regardless of how much they cost, that's when the hard money lender will give me $3,000. So if it costs me $4,000, I'm $1,000 in the hole. If it costs me $2,000, now I've got an extra $1,000 in my pocket. But if that HVAC goes out and I didn't put HVAC on my scope of work, I now have to have that money from somewhere to pay for it. More often than not, that comes out of your pocket. You can't just dip into your $30,000 and say, hey, I need to get this HVAC replaced. That's not how hard money lenders release the funds. And many hard money lenders won't even release the funds until they go out to the property and do an inspection to verify that the work has been completed. Okay. So again, we're getting a little bit in the weeds here, but for those of you that are wholesaling, I want you to understand what a flipper goes through when they're borrowing the funds. All right. So let's say everything goes completely perfect and it's right on $30,000 to get the work done. So they're now all in for a purchase price of $150,000, and then they've got $30,000 in rehab. We're just going to say they're $180,000 in. Now, that's not necessarily the case, because if you were to borrow all that money, you're still going to have interest. You're going to have points on your money. The holding costs and the closing costs adds up right there. So you're going to be a little bit more all in, but just for the sake of the math, we're going to say you're 180 all in. And then you're going to list it for the ARV of $250,000. Okay, now once you list it, you're going to have your realtor commissions that you're going to have to pay. Let's just say 5 to 6%. I don't recommend as a flipper hiring a realtor that'll list for less than 2%, because you're getting what you pay for, right? So if you're hiring like a flat fee realtor or something like that, you're probably not going to be really represented. You're just kind of literally receiving emails and forwarding it on to you and then forwarding back to the other agent, whatever your response is. So it's not really being represented on that. Now, you're going to have the 6% as well as your holding costs, the closing costs originally. Let's say it sells for $250,000. You're going to walk away somewhere in the range of $35,000 to $40,000 in profit. Now, what most people see there is, hey, I've been getting rid of these deals where I'm making $10,000 to $15,000 as a wholesaler, and I could have been flipping these and making $40,000 to $50,000. You know, that's a much larger payday. It's double, triple what I am making. But going through all of this, how much time do you have in the deal? More often than not, that's going to take you somewhere between 3 to 6 months, depending upon the days on market in that specific area, as well as the cash reserves that are needed for that deal. Then also you have the risk that is involved. One, you're doing $30,000 worth of work. It's very rare for a flip that goes perfectly and stays on budget. And what happens if the market shifts? Does it sell for $250,000? Where's that money coming from? It's coming directly from your profit. You're just making less. And then what happens if there's delays, right? I cannot tell you how many times we have hired a contractor to go out and work on a property and there was delays because of the contractor. Oh, the van broke down today. Oh, hey, sorry. So-and-so didn't show up. What happens? We're still paying interest for that day of ownership. Nobody cares about your problems when you're the owner of the property, except for you. So you have to continuously manage that project, be on top of it, and making sure that it's moving along. Otherwise, you're going to be the one that's left with the bag at the end of the day. So in this case, I feel like flipping is high risk. There's a lot that could go wrong, and there's, for in my opinion, little upside in comparison to wholesaling. Now, I get it. You could have higher price points where the profit goes up proportional to the price points. But even there, you're staring at longer delays, more days on market, more work that has to be done. It's just very rare that you find that unicorn market where it's like a smaller house, higher price points, more profit. So more often than not, you're doing a larger house, more opportunities for something to go wrong. Now, let's talk about the buy and hold investor, the landlord. So this is what Manny was really thinking about doing. He's staring at a $35,000 assignment on his deal, and then he's questioning whether if he should do the work and keep it and do the BRRRR. Okay, now in this scenario, what he would have to do is purchase the property. So he has a couple of different options there, similar to the flipper. Use your own cash, use private money, use a hard money loan. More often than not, most people don't want to invest that much of their own cash into a deal, so they're going to borrow it one way or another. So let's say he does the hard money loan, still had to spend the money to acquire the deal, now has to use the capital to close using the hard money loan, still has to manage the rehab, so doing the exact same things that the flipper had to do. But now, at the end of this, instead of having a large payday, he's going to have a smaller payday because he's going to refinance it. But now he has to do additional work. He has to go find that lender. He has to get approved for that loan. He has to go through the appraisal process, make sure his credit's good, fill out all the loan documents. And you might be sitting there thinking like, okay, RJ, like you're getting really nitpicky on all the stuff that has to take place. But if you've ever tried to go get a loan for a refinance, they ask you anything and everything. In fact, today, I'm actually trying to do a refinance on one of my properties, and my lender asked me for proof of 12 months of payment on a sub-2 property that has nothing to do with the property that I'm purchasing or refinancing, and then 12 months of bank statements proving that I've made the payment on that sub-2. Now, this is just one of 26 different documents that I've had to give this lender. Every single time that comes up, I have to stop what I'm doing, go search for those documents, upload it, communicate with the lender. It takes time and focus away from what you're trying to do, which is make money on your other deals. So it does take time and it adds up, especially if you're new at this and you've never done it before. It becomes a little scary. It's like someone is looking inside of your life and your business at every little thing that you spend money on and whether or not you're going to be worthy of receiving that loan. Now, in the BRRRR strategy, you have to get 2 loans if you're borrowing it on the front side. So you've got to do that twice. It just becomes burdensome and for most people, stressful. So you go through that entire process. Now, say the lender is willing to give you 75% of what that property appraises for. So let's do some math here real quick. Property is worth $250,000. they're willing to give us $187,500. Okay. We bought it for 150. We put 30 into it. So we're 180. But you're going to have points when you refinance it, and you're going to have points and holding costs when you purchase it. So not that I love the numbers on this deal, but let's just say everything goes perfectly. You're probably not going to put a ton of money in your pocket. You might be lucky enough to just get everything covered and get all of your money out of it and be in the deal for $0. Now, let's say the numbers were slightly better. Maybe you could pull out $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 tax-free. And that's where most landlords are really relying on the BRRRR strategy, especially when they're newer, because that's a hefty amount of cash influx into their business. Because realistically, most properties don't cash flow enough for the landlord to not be doing another exit strategy. What I mean by that is when you run numbers on a rental property, especially when they're doing the BRRRR strategy, if you were to look at it and say, hey, we're actually netting $300 to $400 a month, and that's taking into account vacancy, maintenance, capital expenditures. So we're talking about that month where no one lives in the property because the tenant decided to move out. And then you had to do marketing and you had to do showings and get the lease signed. Who paid the mortgage that month? What comes from that vacancy that you set aside? Maintenance. What happens when that tenant moves out and you need carpet and paint done and, oh, the little knob on the stove got broken? Well, that comes out of maintenance that you stored and saved away every month. And then capital expenditures. Now, some places like Texas, Oklahoma, we get hailstorms all the time, and the insurance will just cover the replacement of a roof. But in places like Ohio and Michigan and Illinois, where that's not as common, there's times where you might actually have to pay to replace a roof or the boiler or the HVAC. Capital, like large replacements, hot water heater is another one. That eventually, if you're going to own this property for the next 20, 30, 40 years, you are going to have to replace those items. Again, that comes from what you set aside every single month. Now, if you set all that aside and you don't tap into it, you're lucky if you're cash flowing $300 to $400 a month. Now, all in all, that means you're going to be making $3,600 a year on this property. It's not enough for you to really have a sustainable business unless you're doing volume on the landlord side. And that's if everything goes right. Now, let's just say the rent is $1,500 a month. Okay. You're going to set 10% a month aside for capital expenditures. So that's $150. So 150, let's do some math here. I don't want to do the wrong math. 150 times 12 equals 1,800. That's capital expenditures. Now, let's just say the HVAC goes out, and that's $3,000. Where did the extra $1,200 come from? It comes out of the rent, the cash flow that you were assuming, that $3,600. You just lost $1,200. You're down to $2,400. So the play here on being a landlord with the BRRRR strategy is that money that you can get out tax-free when you refinance, have that 25% of equity, hopefully on the long run gain appreciation, but it's not really that monthly cash flow. So when I was talking to Manny about this, I'm like, the fact that you are staring at $35,000 assignment fee, but you're considering walking away from that so you can put some tax-free money in your pocket, but then have this cash flow monthly, it's not everything that you hope it's going to be. Now, the other thing that can happen is you get yourself in a position where you buy the property, you fix up the property, you rent the property for several years, and then you're like, I'd really like to I need some money. Let's sell it. And then you have to do the work again because the tenants mess the place up. And so you find yourself in a position where it's just not as profitable as you thought it was going to be. And this is where we find a lot of landlords coming to us and saying, yeah, I've been doing this for the past 4 or 5 years. I've built up a small portfolio, but I need actual transactions to have cash flow in my business. That's where wholesaling comes in. Okay. Now let's talk about the realtor that's involved in this. Okay. So the realtor has to do their own marketing to get in contact with this homeowner. So same thing that we have to do. Then they're going to go get the listing agreement. They're going to list it on the MLS and say they can go get this sold for higher than it would for a wholesale transaction. That's pretty common. Let's say it's $175,000. So $175,000, and they get a full commission of 6%. So they're going to give 3 to the buyer's agent, and they get to keep 3%. That means the realtor in this transaction would make $5,250. Now, that's not with any split of a commission with the broker. Many realtors out there have to give a percentage of their commissions to the broker until they either hit a cap or they work with like a flat fee broker where it's like, hey, for every transaction, it's $300 to $500, something like that. Even in this scenario, say it's $250, the realtor's walking away with $5,000 in their pocket. Now, the risk involved, not a ton. I mean, honestly, I think the risk for a realtor is lower than a wholesaler because you're protected with a much longer listing agreement. You naturally have the credibility of the fact that you're being put on the MLS with Zillow and there's pictures, and the fact that just everyone knows what a realtor is in comparison to what a wholesaler is. And so the risk of you doing work and not getting paid is very low as a realtor in comparison to all of the other three. It's also why you have the smallest payday. So circling back to our 4 different strategies here. As a wholesaler, you have the least amount of money in on it, but you stand to gain a fairly substantial payday. With our average assignment fee of being $15,000 in comparison to a realtor, where you still have to do the same upfront work, you are protected and you have longer to perform as a realtor, but you're probably going to get paid on this transaction a third of what we get paid. Now, as the price points go higher, that's where realtors can actually win, right? You see a $500,000 property. Let's do the math on that. 500,000 times 3%, $15,000. Now that's our average, right? Now I will be honest with you. If I'm trying to wholesale a $500,000 property, I'm trying to make more than $15,000. But as they increase, realtors make more money. That's why so often, and I hear people ask about why are so many properties in that $50,000 to $150,000 price point on the wholesale side of things. Could be the market, but it's also because, let's be real, are the realtors going to be going out and trying to list a bunch of $50,000 properties? They get paid based off of the sales price, right? If you're in an area where you can go get $300,000 listings, why would you go do marketing to get a bunch of $50,000 listings? It leads to more motivated sellers in those price points and allows us as wholesalers to go in and capture those deals. Now, on the 2 high risk, flippers and the landlords, in my opinion, flipping is super high risk for a low return. Now, you could buy deeper and you could go in and say, I'm not going to do a flip unless I make $50,000, $60,000. Your volume is going to be lower, and it's probably not necessarily just because of the amount of money you're making. It's also just due to the amount of bandwidth that it takes to actually flip, right? To go out, find the properties, manage the contractors, make sure everything's going set up to be sold, hiring the realtors, negotiating inspection items. All of that is on your shoulders as the flipper. Now, as the landlord, you still have to do all the same work that the flipper's doing, just the back end payday is so much lower. Now, here's the thing. Each one of these strategies, there's successful people in each one of them. And I believe they all work. But as I break these down, and I've done each one of these, right? My partner Cassie is a licensed realtor. I've seen what that looks like. We have owned several hundred rental properties, I believe in 13 different states at this point. I have flipped houses from Hawaii to Alaska, from the West Coast all the way to East Coast and north to south, all over the United States. I've seen what that looks like and the stress that's involved. And then I've wholesaled in all 50 states. So from that aspect, I can tell you that for me, this is the reason why we have decided to have the hedgehog concept of purely wholesaling. It's the easiest business to acquire deals. We make more money than we would if we were licensed realtors, but the stress and the risk involved of being the flipper and the landlord is not there, and our payday is worth it from the wholesaling side of things. So if I'm looking at which one of these four do I want my business to be, I'm completely okay with the downside of a wholesaler being that it's transactional, that we have to continue doing deals. Because to be honest with you, from a buy and hold investor, you're doing the exact same thing. You have to continue getting deals. You're going to need that cash flow to help you sustain some of the losses that you're going to have on your properties. And from a flipper, you're doing the exact same thing. Your volume is lower, but you're a transactional business. In order for your business to sustain over the long haul, you have to continue to acquire deals and close and fund more. So that's my breakdown of these four different strategies. And the reason why we have decided the nationwide virtual wholesaling is what we want to do here at Titanium Investments. All right, let's open it up for Q&A for you guys. Hope you all enjoyed that breakdown and it made sense. Mr. Tyler Osborne says, great point. Time is key too. Locked one yesterday, investor boots today, sent to JV, blast the same day. There you go. Move it. Chris says, this was my podcast for today. I hope you're saying that what I said was, or you said the exact same stuff I said. I hope you agreed with me today, Chris. Man, listen, all the stuff that we've ever done, I don't ever want to say that I feel like sometimes it comes across like I'm talking negatively about flipping houses or buy and hold investors or whatnot. And that's not necessarily the case. It's just I want to give you guys a realistic perspective of what these other businesses are going through. Because realistically, when we are wholesaling houses, like we need flippers and we need landlords out there. But we also need to understand what they're going through. I hear wholesalers get upset when, you know, they feel like they have a known go-to end buyer, and then all of a sudden that end buyer, you know, kind of pulls out of the market, doesn't want to purchase any more properties. I get that. I understand why they feel that way at times, because it can be overwhelming just with the amount of work that goes on and things that could go wrong. So Chris says, RJ's a go. I appreciate you, Chris. Zero forever. I'm currently using Lead Zolo, and I'm only marketing to 4 counties in Maryland with high motivation. Do you think it's better to open it up to more counties and or medium motivation? Marketing budget is tight. So what I would say on that is like, this goes back to your hedgehog concept of, you know, we're a nationwide virtual wholesaler. So it sounds to me like I wouldn't even call you a Maryland wholesaler. I don't know what the counties are, but it could even be like you're a Baltimore wholesaler. The issue that you run in there is that if you're newer, you are relying a lot on what's taking place inside of those 4 counties from a seller motivation standpoint to an end buyer, what's happening there. As we're wholesaling across the country, we see different markets that just completely shift overnight, right? Where it's 1 month, you know, end buyers are looking for more deals, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, days on market's really hitting us. We're slowing down purchasing. And if you're solely in that one area, now you're kind of at the mercy of what your end buyers are wanting to do. Now you're talking about from a lead perspective. So zero forever. Here's what I would tell you. The benefit of casting a wider net over state, more counties, or the entire United States is, one, your cost per lead goes down. Okay. So the cost per lead goes down. You said your marketing budget's tight. Okay. Now you said it's the dispo of nationwide deals that bothers me. Having a deal and not being able to dispo, that's the fear. Got it. That's everybody's fear. Okay. And this is like, I don't think that you're in TU. I don't know what your actual name is, but I don't think you're inside of TU. But like inside of Titanium University, there's just straight dispo houses that anytime someone gets a deal, no matter where it is, there's someone inside of there that's willing to dispo that deal. Now, if you're not inside of TU and you wanted to go nationwide and you wanted to have someone that could help you in the areas that you can't, you could join the Vault, our free Facebook group. You could tag me in the post and say, hey, RJ, I'm the guy that's in Maryland. I got a deal in Kentucky. Who do you know in Kentucky that can help me? And I'd say, well, it's, Brittany Shahuber can help you. Danny Herman can help you. Alex Uberhart can help you. Gaetano can help you. I'll tag them. Let them do their thing. The fact is, you just need traction. I think the limiting yourself in the 4 counties, one, it's probably cost you more money to generate those leads from LeadZolo. And then 2, Maryland, I just did a review of Maryland on the YouTube channel a couple of weeks ago. I feel like it's a middle of the road. Yeah, I think I ranked it like 25th to 30th. It's just not a great wholesale market unless like you're super deep into it, right? If you're going to be doing like pulling the list, cold calling, direct mail, we're hammering every single homeowner, then that's where I could see it could be extremely beneficial for you. But if it's like you're more of a virtual wholesaler, lean into the fact that you're virtual and let's go to some other places. Chris says, I'm 100% a wholesaler. When people outside real estate ask what I do, I usually just say I flip houses. It's easier for them to understand, even though it's not exactly true. Curious what you tell people when they ask you what you do. I tell them I'm a nationwide virtual wholesaler. And then they say, well, what does that mean? And I say, well, I do marketing in all 50 states. We never leave our office. We talk to all of the homeowners at our office on Eagle Mountain Lake in Fort Worth, Texas. And then when we get them under contract, we're actually selling that contract to the flipper or to the landlord. And we never even have to buy the real estate. We're just getting paid for it. And then they look at me like I'm crazy. They're like, so what, you don't have to flip the houses? And I'm like, no. And it's just it's a way to start that conversation. The other thing that can come from it is that there's a way that you could explain wholesaling to make you sound like you're the bottom of the barrel. And then there's another way that you could explain wholesaling that makes you seem like you're the cream of the crop. And I like to make it sound like we're the Billy Badass of the industry. Yeah, I mean, we're the guys that go find the deals. Like wholesalers, landlords, they don't know how to find the deals. They just know how to flip the houses and then make it look pretty, the ego shit. We actually know how to go out, solve sellers' problems, find these deals, king closer, we're on the phone. This is how we negotiate and run the numbers and all of that. It just starts a better conversation. So, Chris, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying that you flip houses, but I think it's more beneficial if you just tell people, because there's been a lot of business that has come my way from just conversations that I've had with people about that I would have never anticipated, right? Like my son's hockey families, they start talking to me, and then all of a sudden the other day, one of the dads, I've known him since Trinity was 6, so 7 years now. He reached out and he said, hey, my parents need to sell their house in San Antonio. It's distressed. hasn't been rehabbed since the 70s, what could you offer from it? Now, I don't know if anything's going to come from it, but it's an opportunity, right? So I just think sometimes you just got to tell people what you do, and that's my pitch. That's how I say it. Some agents or sellers will give you the boot. How do you overcome that bridge for credibility? I'm a dude that appreciates honesty and transparency. So, well, Dan, the first thing I'd say is like most agents, we don't deal with agents. We don't do any direct to agent. We don't make offers on properties listed on the MLS anymore. So our interaction with real estate agents is few and far between. Now, every now and then a real estate agent would bring us a deal, but then it's because they know who we are and they've seen something that brought credibility. But as far as sellers go, now that comes back to at what point in time in the conversation are you getting the boot? Now, it's not always going to be 100% that you can fix that. All right. I have a YouTube video of me talking to a seller probably about a year ago where the seller was like, hey, are you a wholesaler? And I was like, I absolutely am. And he didn't like that. And no matter what I said, he was not going to do business with us, and it ended up with us not doing business. In fact, at the end, I told him, because he came back, he came chasing after it, and I was like, listen, I don't like how this conversation went. I don't want to do business with you. But I think honesty and transparency is the way that you build the credibility, Dan. And one of the things that you could do is really kind of pick on the industry. Our competition is weak, Dan. So if you're leaning on the fact that you have no problem being honest and transparent about being a wholesaler to a seller, then that's great. Because if they don't like that for whatever reason, you lean on it. So you don't like the fact that I told you exactly how I can help you and what I'm going to do. And in many states, it's now become a law that you have to disclose that you're going to be a wholesaler, right? As I keep going through all different states and I'm breaking them down every single Friday, I'm talking about the regulations in each state. And the majority of the regulations that have come out against wholesaling have been disclosing to the seller that you're a wholesaler. So if it's in a place that you have to disclose that and no one else has done it, you can pick on that. I'm just doing exactly what the law states. I'm telling you what my intentions are. I'm not going to be an end buyer here. I'm going to assign my equitable interest as contract to an end buyer. This is how I can solve your problem. I think most newer wholesalers feel like that if I tell a homeowner that I am signing a contract for $100,000 and then I'm going to go wholesale it, why wouldn't the seller say, well, I'll just go find that end buyer for $110,000 and keep the $10,000 myself? They don't want us to make money. Now, what's funny is, what about all of the other retail transactions where the majority of homeowners don't say, I don't want to pay a realtor to go find my end buyer and do all this stuff that I don't know how to do? Now, of course, we've all talked to the homeowner that said, the reason why I'm talking to you today is because I don't want to pay a realtor. But that's few and far between. That's like a very small percentage of homeowners in the United States. So looking at it from that perspective, do we really think that the majority of homeowners are not going to want us to make any money for solving the problem? I don't know that that's the case. I think, Dan, most people will respect the fact that you are honest and transparent, especially with how you deliver it. Okay? So it depends on when you need to build that credibility. Now, explaining your process is how you build that credibility, Dan, and giving them the confidence that you are going to be able to perform. The majority of homeowners, it's not that they don't want us to get paid, it's that they don't think that we're going to actually make it to the closing table. Okay, so then you explain the process. Now, this is my process. I wanted you to explain yours. I'm going to send you a 2-page contract. Once you've signed that, we come out. We take pictures. We do our walkthrough of the property. We inspect it. If everything checks out, then we'll be good to close. But if not, then we're at the revisit the price and timeline. Explain that to them. Ask them if they have any questions. The majority of sellers will have some questions. You answer those, and then just at the end go, does everything make sense? Do you understand how this process is going to work? Is there anything that alarms you or worries you about this process? All right, let me send that contract over to you. If they hang up on you or they give you the boot, I mean, it's probably due to lack of motivation. And that's where I would point back to the beginning of the conversation and say maybe you didn't do a good enough job of finding it out. They felt like it was rushed. Dan, a good example of this would be yesterday's YouTube video that I posted. A TU member was on the phone with a seller. I felt like he rushed the close, didn't do a good enough job of explaining the process, kind of just really jumped into let's close it. And then because of that, we never got the contract signed. That's a good learning experience for you. But listen, man, if you're a dude that appreciates honesty and transparency, lean into it. Always be you and do what feels right for you and your business. All right, everybody. Looks like that's all the questions that you got for me today. So I appreciate you. Hope you enjoyed today's topic of wholesaler versus flipper versus long-term investor versus realtor. Decide what your hedgehog concept is going to be. Lean into that and solely focus on that moving forward. Don't chase the shiny objects. Show me some love. Like today's video. We'll see you guys tomorrow.